Hello there! It is of course Nick Dutch back on the camera again one more time. And this is going to be like my final run through, as it were, or my final rehearsal of my talk that I'm doing about deism and about transdeism, basically later on this week. It's something which I have had some nerves and anxiety about, because I'm doing this in front of like real people and not just doing things in front of a camera. Now, I don't know whether you yourself are a YouTube user in the fact that you do broadcast yourself, but you might find it a lot easier to speak your mind just talking to a camera, or that lump of plastic with a lens on it that's sitting on your desk or resting on your computer monitor, than it is to do an entire presentation in front of, let's say, a group of people, some of whom might actually be your friends. Alright? So this is where the anxiety is for myself. I can sit here and I can say more or less anything I want to, within certain limits, of course. But when it comes to expressing this in front of people who are basically who I'm going to see on a face-to-face basis in the future, there's a bit more in the way of anxiety associated with it, for reasons known only to the workings of my own twisted little mentality. Okay, so this is essentially the talk on deism or deism. And of course, important date for the history of deism is around about 1818 with the publication of the Age of Reason, of which there was two parts, the second part of which was to do with the ideas surrounding God, or the concepts of God, according to Thomas Paine, who was the author of the book The Age of Reason. A few quick quotes from Thomas Paine. Firstly, everything that we behold carries in itself the internal evidence that it did not make itself. The belief in a first cause, eternally existing, man calls God. So that gives you an idea as to where he's coming from, okay? Who was it who created my cup? Well, there was a factory which created my cup. This is his thinking, okay? So essentially the factory is the cup creator. So you can go back further than that and say that the clay was created somehow, and then the thing which created the clay would have, and so on and so forth, going back and back and back and back and back, until such time as you end up with like the birth of the universe and what created that. So essentially that's where he's getting his idea that there was something, a first cause, which created the universe. So, God is the power of the first cause, nature is the law, and matter is the subject acted upon. And finally, deism or deism is to believe in God and to live by moral virtues. So he does regard his idea of religion, or Thomas Paine's idea of religion, as being something which has some kind of influence upon your conduct as a human being. But it's not necessarily quite that prescriptive. I mean, the basic tenets of deism, as in the classical deism, what we now call classical deism, which is where a lot of our modern interpretations of deism came from, had some very basic tenets to it. Number one, God is the creator. Number two, people should live by reason and logic. So there is like a kind of like a moral structure there to a certain degree. Number three, God doesn't reveal himself to people, nor does he care for one people or a group of people above another. So there's no divine or special revelation to a specific group of individuals. Deism is the natural religion because there is no dogma and no religious texts. Okay, it's brought about by a natural process of contemplation, and therefore deists tend to reject revelation in terms of explaining a religion to you, like someone saying, you must believe in Jesus or you must believe in Muhammad or whatever. That would be a revealed religion. But deism says, no, you can work it out for yourself. You can just use your brain, basically. And the fifth and final point of what deism is basically is that mankind's relationship with God is impersonal, which means that it's not a question of a conversation between yourself and a higher power concept, which is a departure from some forms of deism, which I'll get into in just a moment. Okay. So now we can have a quick look at what a deist does, or what a deist does or believes and thinks. So some basic ideas, and these are just basic because every deist is capable of thinking for themselves and being within their own, being their own thing which defines and works with morality, reason, logic, and all the rest of that. The first point is pro-science, reason, logic and education. Alright? And this is why some deists might appear in some forms to be quite close to that of an atheist, because a lot of atheists sort of like revere, science, nature and education and so on and so forth. The second point is skeptical of hard truth claims. Just as I mentioned about what Thomas Paine was writing about, the belief there is, or the attitude there is that there's no special revelation to an individual. So if an individual comes up to you and says, God spoke to me and he told me that you've got to give up smoking now, you can basically disbelieve them, basically, despite the fact you should probably give up smoking anyway. But it's not because God told you, okay? It's more because we found out because of science and research and all the rest of that smoking is actually bad for you, okay? So you can move away from the hard truth claim that God spoke to that person, and you can move towards using free thoughts, reason, science, logic, education and knowledge, okay? So the third point is, of course, free thoughts, and by that somebody else doesn't do the thinking for you. So it's not a question of, okay, on a Tuesday I've got to light a yellow candle because that's what the God of Tuesdays wants me to do. Okay, you can light a yellow candle whenever in the name of all that's holy, you want to light your yellow candle, as if you want to light a yellow candle at all, okay? So that you're not permitting somebody else or some other structure to be able to tell you how to think. You can use whatever you want in accordance with your own self-knowledge, okay? But there's nothing saying you must do this, you must do that, you must do the other. Okay, the fourth point is essentially questioning. I mean, when I myself was going through the New Age world, I was actually discouraged from asking questions. I was discouraged from turning around to people and saying, well, you might say that, but what if you're wrong? And so instead of actually addressing my question, what these people would do is they would try and defeat me through bullying me or through terrifying me, which essentially didn't work out right, because I ended up being a deist and not being what they wanted me to be in the first place. So essentially that particular tactic doesn't actually work with people. But essentially a deist would naturally be questioning, why should I believe in God? Why should I believe in your God? Why should I do this particular ritual or ceremony or practice? What particular good would it do me? What am I supposed to be getting out of this? Why should I read that particular book? What is it that you're trying to create or to make happen with the help of me reading that particular book or doing that particular exercise? And why is it that you believe in this way when essentially there may be other possibilities here? Alright, this is what a deist would do, just to basically say, what is really going on here. Okay, next one is doubt. Now, doubt has a very good, it's probably the most important thing that I personally think about, okay? I read a deist website which says it just keeps us on our toes, alright? But as far as I'm concerned, it gives me self-questioning. Because if I'm someone who's got like complete and utter devout belief in a particular concept, then I'm not going to ask questions of myself and why I've got that particular belief or value. Alright, so complete unwavering belief is not necessarily a good thing. And how is that supposed to be able to help you to grow and to develop as a human being? Basically it can't. So one of these interesting things that deists have is the ability and the desire to have a certain quantity of doubts about the things that they believe. So doubting their own religion, so to speak, basically. Which I think actually makes an awful lot of good common rational sense. The next point would be reverence for nature, because for a lot of deists, including classical deists, nature is the way in which God, as the creator, has revealed himself to the whole of humanity, alright, all of us. Because it's all there in the rocks, the oceans, the wind, everything, atoms, molecules, you name it. It's all amazing, the water cycle, the oxygen cycle, rock cycle, isn't it just like, oh, mind-blowing. And all these things exist so that we can actually eventually come into the world through evolution and all the rest of that. So essentially a certain quantity of reverence for nature. But being someone who's allowed to doubt and question, I personally don't think that it matters whether I believe that God is the creator or not. That's my own issue, but that's never mind. And then the final point that I've written down here is self-discovery of morality and belief in a higher power and living by moral values that you develop with the passage of time. So, you know, it's all quite, I suppose, commonsensical, alright? And it allows you to change and develop and grow with your own spirituality, whether, you know, depending upon how you choose to have it and what level of importance you personally want to apply it within your own life. Okay? Within the unified deism, the Texan group that I've had some kind of participation with historically here on YouTube, okay, they do say that deism is to be spiritual but not to be religious, or in this particular case not to be dogmatic. So you, again, you can make your own choices there as to how, you know, to what level this is going to impact upon your life in accordance with your own reasoning ability. Okay. Now, a brief overview of some types of deism, because that's important too. Just 1 second. Alright, now, I'll quickly point out that this is only a scant overview. There are lots of different types of deism. Some of them have much more of a political bias. Some of them have more of a religious bias, and so on and so forth. Okay, there's millions of them out there, squillions. Let's have a look at a few of them. There's monotheism, which says that there is a singular God who created the universe but does not get involved in human affairs, and God merely observes, a bit like a scientist observing an experiment. Then there's polytheism, which suggests that there's different gods which created different parts of the universe, but also these gods sort of like look on and observe, rather than necessarily sort of like appearing to someone and saying, "Hi there, I happen to be the creator of the universe. Tell you what, shall we sort of like get your people out of slavery," and so on and so forth. He doesn't really, you know, they don't really do that. Okay. Then there's pantheism, which suggests that God is the universe. That's more or less all there is to it. Okay, although there would be some pantheists who would not necessarily suggest that, but a lot of pantheists say that, you know, it's only the physical stuff. The physical stuff is God. You know, have reverence for that, and that's essentially it. So that's very much as your sort of natural science bias, rather than necessarily a theological bias. Then we move on to pan-entheism, which is the one that I think is really, really, you know, totally orgasmic. That's the one whose term was coined by Larry Coupling in the year 2000, which suggests that the universe is only a small part of God. And also there's the possibility of there being multiple universes, multiple dimensions, and therefore it gets also like quantum physicsy and very kind of like trippy, if you get my drift. Okay. Then finally, well, not finally, the next one we got is process deism, which suggests that both God and the universe can and do change with time. There's Christian deism, and I suppose there must also be a Muslim deism, and then whatever is deism, or deism, which suggests that Jesus Christ didn't actually do miracles, but was just a great teacher, which is pretty cool if you think about it. I think that in the Western world today, there's probably lots of people who would have some empathy with Christian deism, actually. Then, of course, there's philosophical deism, which states that there are similarities between all religions. Now, in my own personal journey, I think that I've got, you know, little bits of all of these things thrown into me somewhere along the line, in varying different quantities and qualities. Because basically, the definition of deist that I am, or indeed the definition of spiritual type person or religious type person that I am, is bound to change with time, isn't it? Because I'm a human being. We're going to have a change to our opinions, but there may still be some things that remain constant about me personally. So I'm going to quickly go back to pan-entheism before we then move on to like the all-important part of the talk itself. Pan-entheism, not pantheism, but pan-entheism, suggests that all physical reality exists within the divine or within God. All right. There's also a allusion to a creative intelligence which is omnipresent and may be basically everywhere, and may also precede the creation of the three-dimensional physical universe. So within pan-entheism, there is a belief in the possibility that this omnipresent sort of like spirity type force, which is believed to be everywhere, may have actually sort of been together in one big blob prior to the Big Bang itself. So prior to the Big Bang, there was only the one, and from the one, then became absolutely everything else. So that's how they kind of like tie into the creation aspect. But it's assumed within pan-endeism, or with certain parts of pan-endeism, that spiritual development brings you closer to the one, that state of mind or that thing that was there prior to the creation of the universe. Now, although science is the foundation of classical deism, pan-endeism permits experimental metaphysics, an experiential, experimental relationship to the divine or to deity, which is, of course, the omnipresent, Luke used the Force kind of like thing, basically. Okay, so it allows you, it's within a paradigm, a religious point of view, which allows you to be able to do something, including meditation, prayer, ritual, and ceremony, and so on and so forth. But for reasons of history, that has come under another term, and that other term is transdeism, experimental metaphysics in action. And that's basically where we get on to what I am. Because basically, as I mentioned earlier on, the thing about me which is going to change is what I believe. Alright? It's not necessarily what I do. Now, I will always be a contemplative individual. I always have been a contemplative individual. There has always been some kind of spiritual dimension associated with me, even going back to the days when I just wanted to be an electronic engineer when I was in my teens, okay? Which obviously didn't happen. The universe had other plans for me and actually brought me here right now to the point whereby I can talk to you and tell you about all the wonders of transdeism. Okay. Transcendental deism is peculiar because it comes from two different words. There's transcendentalism, and words associated with transcendentalism includes spellcasting, meditation, tarot, prayer, charms, worship, ritual, runes, and so on and so forth. Whereas with deism, you've got doubt, questioning, reason, rationality, non-superstitious, non-dogmatic, and freedom of thought. And putting those two together creates a bit of an issue, doesn't it? Because essentially, on one side of things, you've got all of these non-empirical, experiential things, and on the other side of it, you've got all of these very empiricist, contemplative, and rationality-based ideas. So it's applying that level of rational, scientific mentality to the experiences that you get from transcendentals. So, in practice, experiential, experimental occultism, the unempirical investigation into transcendental experience. Okay? And also, there is another benefit towards transdeism, and that is that it can be used to create a rational and practical defense of the magical tradition, taking into account, of course, the definitions which Aleister Crowley wrote about. And yes, one of the important things about transdeism, the way I'm talking about it, is because it is undermining the main New Age understanding of what the word magic actually is. Because there's New Agers, pagans, occultists, and all the rest of that who carry on saying magic is the art and science of causing change to occur in conformity with the will. Which actually goes contrary to what Aleister Crowley was actually trying to explain to people, namely to use the word magic to mean absolutely everything you do in your daily life. You're just trying to provide a grandiose word to sum up being and doing. Alright, that's all he was trying to do. But then he also mentioned the magic of tradition, which is essentially psi-type phenomena, which involves your meditation, astral projection, anything else you do associated with tarot, ritual, and all the rest of it. But it's unscientific because it's unempirical. It is the transcendentalism part of transdeism, but it has the reason and rationality, trying to apply the reason and rationality from deism to it is what I'm trying to do here, and was possibly what Aleister Crowley was trying to do for those who were interested in that sort of thing at that time. But he did it badly because people have misunderstood his writings. Okay, so what I'm doing here with transdeism is not only saying this is what I am, because this is the one thing that I will always be doing. It's also justifying the search for transcendental experience and not literally believing in the spirits which you might and or might not come across within your experiences. And definitely being doubting, like a deist would be, because that's what I am, I'm still a deist, of someone's revelation to me of spirits or angels or demons and so on and so forth. So I hope what I've done there is I've explained to you how deism has led me to where I am today. It's definitely helped me to articulate myself and get my notes in order so that I'll be good when I do my talk. And I hope you've enjoyed the video. I bid you good fortune, God, in whatever form He takes, or not, as the case may be, bless, and have a great day. God bless.